It was so interesting to hear Kirby Smart at Media Days go on the record correcting someone saying it's Georgia, Florida, not Florida, Georgia, which is so funny. Um, I've, I've been around long enough to remember Dave Van Hallinger, who passed away not that long ago this summer, unfortunately. He would call it Florida, Georgia because he'd been a coach at Florida State, and that's what it kind of was thought of for him. But it takes people a while to get used to, Georgia, Florida, or Florida, Georgia. But Kirby correcting, I can't remember what room we were in. But it was quite funny to me. I think we might have been in the small room. And I'll tell you, since Kirby has taken this thing over, it's certainly been Georgia, Florida. And it doesn't look like that game's going to change anytime soon. There could be a moment in time. There's still, I'm not sure I fully understand whether anyone knows yet if that game has to move from Jacksonville. But it might not have to move, even with so there's a 2-year plan and a 4-year plan to build the stadium. The 4-year plan allows the Jags and Dogs and Gators to play there. The 2-year plan, I think, is we're not stopping for anything. My suspicion is they will go with the 2-year plan, which will make Georgia and Florida move at least for a season, which I would not be for that personally. I wouldn't be screaming and yelling against it. I think it would be probably a 2-year where the game would be in in Athens and Gainesville. And I think that would remind everybody why the game's played not in Jacksonville or not in Athens and Gainesville. I think it would be perfectly fine in Athens. I don't think people would like to go down to Gainesville. I mean, I'm just being honest. I think there's a lot of people that prefer not to go down to Jacksonville. There's a lot right with that game. And there's a lot that still needs to be massaged and gotten better and all this stuff. But it's way better than it was. If it were me, I would let the Gator Bowl take it over. Let them be the ones who are responsible for everything. It's too much that Florida's having to handle, in my opinion, off the field. And I would just let them handle it. It would be a better experience. But it's become, you cannot compare that game now versus what it was like 25 years ago. It's just a better event. It's a lot better event than it was. But it's still got a long way to go in my mind. When they redo the stadium, I think that'll help a lot. Hey, this is the last day I'm going to be promoting this like this. Pick up Double Dogs today, and you're going to get our 2023 preview included with it. This is the last day that you can get this offer like this. So you've been warned. Now, tomorrow I'm going to have a big offer for everybody, period. It doesn't matter if you've purchased a book or not. If you purchased a book, you're in really good shape. But our friends at Red Zone have really stepped up. And we want to make sure everybody's taking advantage of the offer that's coming starting tomorrow. It'll be on one of these videos, and I'll probably blast it out on email, but we'll see. It's that time of year. It's time to get going. And, if you're ready for Georgia, Florida, as Kirby calls it, then you're going to be ready for Georgia, Tennessee, Martin, or whoever it is. For a long time, and to say all that, to say this, it's go time, and it's go time at Dog Post, and I want y'all to take advantage of what we got tomorrow. It will help everybody get ready for the season, that's for sure, and it's not just my promotion, so keep that in mind. I think, Georgia's gotten such a hold of this rivalry lately, winning 5 of 7, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Yeah. I'm sorry. 5 of 7. They're just the better program right now. And I think the national championships prove it. The books, these moments prove it. It used to be, I remember at least. And see, Kirby wasn't around for all these times. But he was around for plenty of them, but not all of them. I remember when Florida used to make plays like that. It felt like. In 2010, a game Georgia should have won and lost in overtime. in 2003, losing like that was a bad loss for Georgia. 2006, was one thing. 2005, 2002, those were really rough losses. Those losses really, I think, haunted Mark Richt. Those were losses that really hurt his. I mean, they did hurt his legacy. They went on to win the league in both cases, but an undefeated Georgia at the end of 2002 probably still does not play for the national championship, but it would have been, you would have an argument to claim a national championship with the way they buzzsawed through the end of that schedule, at least. But that is Georgia's most important game. I think it's probably I'd have to really sit down and look at it, but I think it is probably the second most important game in the SEC every single year. I would say personally, Auburn, Alabama is the most important. I think, you could make the case that LSU, Alabama is number 1, number 2, or number 3, but Georgia, Florida is either 1, 2, or 3. I think there are years that it's number 2 and number 1 flip flops from LSU, Alabama to Auburn, Alabama. I don't think Georgia Auburn has ever been the most important game, but for Georgia, this is the biggest game of their season. See, it is so much when like for instance, Dylan Weber, Andrew Stevens, Mary Helen Jones. These are all people that went to Georgia, but they came out of state. They didn't know a lot about the Dogs. They didn't know a lot about the culture that is Georgia. One of the things that makes Georgia special is Georgia, Florida, period. And I think that's why I would be really hesitant about moving it permanently. I mean, it does look like it's going to be moved. We're going to see. But I think it will return to Jacksonville. Jacksonville's not just making that stadium, looking like a spaceship so they won't host that game. I mean, that is very much a part of Jacksonville. It is part of Jacksonville's identity. But when you talk with students who are from out of state and they don't know anything, Andrew was from Louisiana and obviously understood very well LSU's situation. Mary Helen's father played at Clemson, and she understood Clemson in South Carolina. She didn't. I mean, Dylan was from Texas, and understood UT and A&M, but he didn't understand. So when you walk through, and even people from Georgia that are not Georgia people, it takes a second or two to understand the rhythm of the season. And that's kind of been destroyed because of Auburn being moved from November to October, but at least it's not gone. And I think Georgia, Florida, and Tech, Georgia are the two things you could just never do without. Now, a lot of people are going to get smart down here and say, oh, I could do without Tech. Well, you didn't grow up in Atlanta, and most of us did. So, all due respect to wherever you grew up, Tech, Georgia is, if you are a Georgia person and don't understand the importance of Georgia Tech, and clean old-fashioned hate, you might not really be a Georgia person. And just because Georgia's whipping their ass this century doesn't mean that's not an important game. It is how you conclude the season. It would be like not having Halloween, So, all of these things, and this is what I think you need to worry about if you're the SEC. I'm not in love with Georgia, South Carolina, but I'll tell you, and a lot of people on here know this, I have a lot of ties in South Carolina. Those people are pissed that they're not playing that game in 2024. I mean, they're not happy about it. It's their linchpin game in the conference, and there's a lot of they're not pleased. But they don't have Georgia, Florida. They don't have Auburn, Alabama. They don't have, Georgia, Auburn. They don't have Mississippi. They don't have the Egg Bowl. That's what makes Georgia special, is they have not just one of those games, but 3. They have 3 nickname games. Who has that? Kirby was talking about, one reason we have so many rivalries. Y'all have 3 rivalries. You play big games, but you have 3 rivalries. and he was talking about, they're the only state in the union that has 5 contiguous states. I think he meant in the SEC because even Missouri has, or the old school SEC. I think Missouri has like 8 states that touch it. I know I would never want to go back to Missouri if I could help it. Now I'm going to challenge myself. I actually won the geography bee. If you don't mind, I won the geography bee and represented my school back in the day. But yeah, Missouri borders Iowa, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Nebraska. It's 8. I did get that right. Georgia, on the other hand, borders Florida, South, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Alabama. So just 5. But what Kirby's touching on is, everybody hates us. Yeah, that's right. I mean, the only team I think in the league, I'd have to go back and look at the LSU thing, but the only team Georgia has a losing record against is Alabama in the entire league. I mean, that's a lot of success. You wonder why people dislike you. You got a 30-game lead on Tech. You've built a 10-game lead against Auburn or whatever it is. 10-game lead against the Gators, like a 30-game lead against South Carolina, 30-game lead against Clemson. They don't play the North Carolina schools. So, there's a lot right now there's a lot of envy, but when you start talking about Georgia, Florida, you start talking about Tech in Georgia, Auburn, Georgia, those are all games that they're the reason why Georgia is Georgia. And I think at USC and UCLA, they will keep that game, whatever it's called. I don't know the name of it. I don't know if it's I don't know. But they will lose everything else about themselves and go into the Big Ten. Now, it may be worth it. It may be worth it. I don't know. But, you would not want Georgia to play Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, Texas A&M, Mississippi, Mississippi State, and whoever else to be their SEC schedule. You'd want it to be against their foes that they're used to, their true rivals, Georgia, Tech, Florida, and Auburn. And when you don't get that, there'd better be a very good explanation as to the reason why.